What do you think should be done, Vinay? Because there's two camps on this. Like, let's forgive and have a reconciliation about all this and move on and forget it. Why are we beating this dead horse? And others who say, but if we do that, when the next, Marburg pandemic or whatever comes, or bird flu, the same shit's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't believe in forgiveness because, in my opinion, these pieces of shit are still lying. I mean, like, if you want forgiveness, the first thing you have to say is what you actually did wrong. And they're still fucking lying. Well, based on the best information we had at the time, cloth masking 2-year-olds was a sensible. No, it wasn't, you fucking liar. I knew it wasn't. You have to be dropped on your head to think that. I mean, you're lying, dude. And just say, okay, fine, I was scared. I wanted to go to my sex party. I thought if the 2-year-olds masked up, I could have more parties. Just say you were lying. Just say you made shit up. And then I also want them to admit they didn't run any studies. I want them to admit that they didn't run any studies, even though people told them to. And I want them to admit that they censored people on Facebook who talked about, I want them to admit what they did wrong. Once they admit, then we'll talk about forgiveness. But they're still not fessing up. And the new narrative is, we did the best with what we had at the time. This example shows that that's not true, that there was information they had at the time and they were privately doing different things.
Interesting, because the science on COVID, on the lockdowns, on the mitigation measures, on a whole host of topics, if the public was listening, they would hear this idea that there was this univocal sort of univocal conclusion that you had to do lockdowns, you had to wear masks, you had to socially distance, you had to put plastic barriers up, you had to close schools, you had to do all of these things, that the vaccines would stop transmission of the disease, that therefore it was warranted to force people to lose their jobs over them. All of these ideas were sold as if there was a scientific consensus in favor of them. That was a lie. There was never a scientific consensus on almost any of the topics. And as you say on masks, in fact, the pre-existing narrative, the pre-existing idea among most scientists before the pandemic was quite the opposite direction. What happened was a relatively small group, a cartel almost, of very powerful scientific bureaucrats took over the whole apparatus of science, at least as far as the public eye was concerned, dominated the media, dominated the message to politicians. And as a result, we had a catastrophic response to COVID. And we're going to be paying the cost of that for a very long time.
The greatest perpetrator of misinformation during the pandemic has been the United States government. Misinformation that COVID was spread through surface transmission, that vaccinated immunity was far greater than natural immunity, that masks were effective. Now we have the definitive Cochrane review. What do you do with that review? Cochrane is the most authoritative evidence body in all of medicine and has been for decades. Do you just ignore it, not talk about it? That myocarditis was more common after the infection than the vaccine. Not true. It's 4 to 28 times more common after the vaccine. That young people benefit from a booster. Misinformation. Our two top experts on vaccines quit the FDA in protest over this particular issue, pushing boosters in young, healthy people. The data was never there. That's why the CDC never disclosed hospitalization rates among boosted Americans under age 50. The vaccine mandates would increase vaccination rates. The George Mason University study shows it didn't. It did one thing. It created never-vaxxers who are now not getting the childhood vaccines they need to get. Over and over again, we've seen something that goes far beyond using your best judgment with the information at hand. We've seen something which is unforgivable, and that is the weaponization of medical research itself. The CDC putting out their own shoddy studies, like their own study on natural immunity, looking at one state for 2 months, when they had data for years on all 50 states. Why did they only report that one sliver of data? Why did they salami slice the giant database? Because it gave them the result they wanted. Same with masking study. Well, the data has now caught up in giant systematic reviews, and the public health officials were intellectually dishonest. They lied to the American people. Thank you.